I want to welcome you. My name is Beth Salzberg. I'm the director of the JF&CS Alzheimer's and Related Dementias Family Support Program here in Waltham in Greater Boston. I'm a clinical social worker. And with Jessica Roque, I lead the Dementia Friends program for Massachusetts. Dementia Friends is a global public awareness program that trains community members to lead 1-hour interactive workshops about dementia in their community. In Massachusetts, we offer this curriculum in 9 languages and several culturally adapted versions. Later today, you're going to meet our 9 community partners who lead these workshops in under-resourced communities throughout Massachusetts. Jessica, would you put links in the chat to Dementia Friends Massachusetts and Dementia Friends USA? Thank you. And now we would love to see who is here with us today. So please introduce yourself in the chat. We're asking you to use the chat function today for introductions and comments. And we have a Q&A function that we would like you to use for questions. So in the chat, please let us know where you're joining us from. And as an icebreaker, what is one thing you do for your brain health? And if you're not sure, then stay tuned because you're going to be learning a lot about what you can do for your brain health today. So let's go ahead and give folks a chance to introduce themselves for a moment. It's great to see in the chat that people are coming from many locations. From all over. It's wonderful. And what's something that you do for your brain health? I see walk in the woods, exercise, do puzzles. So while you're continuing to introduce yourself, I want to go over some housekeeping. This meeting is being recorded. A link to recordings, slides, and a resource list will be shared. We will set up a web page with those resources in about 2 weeks. And so personal recording and AI recording are not allowed, and we will need to remove these devices from the meeting. And I want to thank all my colleagues who are helping with technology and monitoring the chat and Q&A. Please do submit any questions for the speakers or comments for the speakers into the Q&A. If you're having any problems connecting to the meeting, my coworker Anne is available through the chat under the name Ask Tech Help. So feel free to chat a technology question to Ask Tech Help. Some of you have purchased CEUs, continuing education units, and there are a few requirements for that. Please attend the whole program live today, so we're not able to give those out to people who watch the recording later. There will be a short evaluation that we'll give to you at the end of the program, and you will need to complete that, and we hope everyone will complete it because we would love your feedback. And certificates will be sent during November. Our learning objectives for today are to explain the connection between modifiable dementia risk factors and social determinants of brain health, to describe challenges faced by the linguistic and cultural communities represented here today, and how these can contribute to brain health disparities and ideas for addressing these challenges. And then to learn tips from research and personal experience about how to stay healthy and stay well while living with a dementia diagnosis. I want to say a couple of thank yous. With the support of our sponsors, we're able to provide this event free of charge to attend. Our gold sponsors are Point 32 Health Foundation, which supports this event and the Community Partner Initiative of Dementia Friends Massachusetts, and Embrace Home Care and Health Services. Thank you so much. And our silver sponsors, Seniors Helping Seniors and Assisting Hands Home Care in Greater Boston and Age Span, serving the Merrimack Valley and North Shore of Massachusetts. Happy 50th anniversary to Age Span, and thank you. We also want to thank our promotional partners. These are great organizations to check out if you're not familiar with them. Alzheimer's Association, Massachusetts, New Hampshire chapter, International Association for Indigenous Aging, Dementia Action Alliance, Massachusetts Council on Aging, which runs Dementia Friendly Massachusetts, and the National Council of Dementia Minds. Thank you. Here's our agenda for today. I am completing our welcome section. We're going to have two quick welcomes from two of our good friends, and then I'll go over a little bit of framing to just explain how the themes today link together. And then we're going to have a series of 3 discussions. The first one will focus on brain health, the latest on research and how we talk about it. The second one will focus on social determinants of brain health and community experiences. Then we'll have a 15-minute break. And then we will have a discussion on living well with dementia with 2 advocates who are themselves living well with dementia and have so much to share with us. Then we'll wrap up and go to our closing. So now let's invite our speakers to give a quick welcome and hello. First, Nora Moreno-Cargi, who's the president of Point 32 Health Foundation, Vice President of Corporate Citizenship for Point 32 Health. Nora, are you there? Are you able to unmute?
I am.
Wonderful.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of my entire team, Beth Chandler, Caitlin Sullivan, and Christina Matthews, I want to say thank you for joining this esteemed group of interested parties. I feel like, in my mind, that you're learning about the importance of creating an awareness and educating yourselves on this important topic is really heartwarming. I want to start with a story about why. I'm going to get emotional, so I'll say that ahead. Start with a story about why, and this is important, and a thank you. So recently, my aunt was placed in a memory care facility in Florida. My aunt, who lived the vast majority of her life in Puerto Rico, where she spoke Spanish, she had food that was culturally relevant, she was, surrounded by family, music, and then circumstances led her to be moved to this facility where none of those who were in attendance spoke Spanish. So it was only when we would visit her that we would speak in the language that she was most comfortable in. And you could see the difference between her demeanor and her engagement when we spoke to her in her native language. And so having experienced that and seeing that up front, it just reaffirmed the work that Beth leads, and just how important it is to communicate in a language that is relevant and is comfortable for people by and large, so that when they talk and work with family members or with people who they provide care for, that we know that we are having an impact, because we see that it does make a difference when we approach people from where they are. And so that's my little story. The work that you do is so critical and important. And so it is a pride for us as a foundation to support the great work that Dementia Friends has been leading in Massachusetts, and especially Beth Solzberg. She has been a source of inspiration for me. And so just want to call you out, Beth, and thank you so much for your leadership it is important that when we create awareness, we create it in the context of accurate information, that we create it in the context of what's important. And in particular, this meeting where it's about brain health and how we can make those connections to the social and structural determinants of health, and how we can get ourselves and the people that we love living well, and living with a brighter and better outcome when we promote and elevate this idea of culture and what's important to individuals. And so thank you for all the incredible work that you do and that you lead.
Nora, thank you so much. I am very moved by your story about your aunt, and what you've seen matters to her and to your family. And I want to just take this opportunity to acknowledge that when we talk about dementia, we are talking about something that hits home very personally for so many of us, and that we know there are many participants here today who themselves are living with cognitive changes, mild cognitive impairment, or a dementia diagnosis, or who care about someone who is, as well as people who are involved in this work or just interested, or all of the above. So thank you for setting the tone, Nora, of sharing with your story and your comments. And thanks to you and your team for your incredible support. And now I'd love to invite Gail Schulman to come on audio and say a couple words of welcome. Gail is the Chief Executive Officer of Jewish Family and Children's Service of Greater Boston, which is
ask a question before we go any further?
Yes.
Is this for specialized people? I don't have an organization or anything. I'm just really interested in Alzheimer's. Can I join, or is it specifically for certain people?
You are welcome to be here, Tracy. It's for anyone who wants to learn.
Thank you so much. I do. I really do.
Great. Glad you're here. Thank you. Gail, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Nora, for that incredibly moving story. It actually makes me even more proud to say that Jewish Family and Children's Service is able to provide the Dementia Friends Public Awareness Program for Massachusetts. Our work at JFNCS is about improving lives in the face of the many, many complications that life throws at us. And certainly a dementia diagnosis is one of those complications. Raising awareness and providing accurate information about dementia supports, it's part of our commitment to support aging with dignity in all communities. Our goal at JFNCS is to help all people with a dementia diagnosis and their families to live as well as they possibly can. And our hope today is that this symposium will help all of you in that shared goal. We are very moved that so many of you joined us today to hear the insights of our Dementia Friends Massachusetts community partners and our other speakers. So have a wonderful symposium.
Thank you so much, Gail, and really appreciate JFNCS for offering Dementia Friends Massachusetts and so many other important programs for people throughout the lifespan. So now let's jump ahead and dig into the content for today. Briefly, what is dementia? It's always important to clarify what we're talking about here. And today we are going to be talking about dementia. Dementia is not a specific disease. It's an umbrella term for medical conditions that cause difficulty with memory, thinking, or making decisions that affect everyday activities. Alzheimer's disease is the most common medical condition, but there are many others, and you see some on screen. Today, we're going to talk about the impact of dementia on individuals and communities, but we're not going to talk in detail about the medical conditions that cause dementia. If you have questions or concerns about changes in your memory or thinking or someone else's, a good resource is the Alzheimer's Association helpline. You can call for free. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can talk with a trained counselor with interpretation in over 200 languages. And Jessica's going to put the phone number in the chat. So today we are really going to be connecting some dots. When we started planning for today's program, the 9 Dementia Friends community partners, whom you're going to meet a little later, and I talked about what's the buzz in the communities where they're leading dementia education sessions. What are people talking about? And the answer was brain health. And why are so many people talking about brain health? There's a couple of reasons. First, brain health research has given us a lot of hope. We have hope that we could change how we live to be healthier in general, and also to reduce the risk of developing dementia. Second, brain health is easier for people to talk about than dementia. Unfortunately, there's a lot of fear and stigma about dementia. And so there has been a trend toward using the concept of brain health as a more comfortable doorway into talking about the subject in general. And for both of these reasons, Dementia Friends USA has just introduced a brain health component for the Dementia Friends information sessions. We'll be adding it this winter. So this is all good news. This is all positive, that we are learning more about brain health. We're learning how powerful it is to live in such a way that we're keeping our brains healthy. And, so this is a both and, yes, and there is a lot that is complicated about brain health. It's not so easy to understand the research or to put the recommendations into practice. And there are people living with dementia now, and there will continue to be people diagnosed with dementia and living with dementia. So we still need to be able to talk about dementia specifically and how to live well with dementia. So the goal of today's program is to connect some dots, and I'm going to walk you through the dots that we will be connecting. So first of all, aging is the biggest risk factor for developing dementia. Our society is aging, so more people are living with dementia. Let's start with that as our first dot. About 1 in 10 adults age 65 and older lives with mild cognitive impairment or dementia. The number of people in the US who are living with dementia is expected to almost double by 2060. Coupled with that is the fact that we see some communities have a higher risk of developing dementia and less access to getting a timely diagnosis, treatment, and care. So I put that dot, disparities in risk, diagnosis, treatment, and care, up with our first dot. Women, Black or African American, Latino American, American Indian and Alaska Native, LGBTQ plus people, people living in rural communities. These are some of the groups of people, which of course overlap because all of us has many dimensions. So we may be in more than one of these groups. These are some of the groups that have higher risk or less access to services. And if you'd like to see data, the Alzheimer's Association Facts and Figures is a great resource. And also Us Against Alzheimer's just held a summit with recorded sessions. And 2 years ago, we offered another Let's Talk About Dementia and Culture, and you can watch the recordings. So Jessica, my colleague, is putting those links in the chat. And I just want to say, as I go through these slides, and at any point today, if you want to share some resources in the chat, I would encourage you to do that. We will go through all of the chat messages after this event, and we're going to put together a resource list with a few of the key resources and make that available as a follow-up to this event. So please do feel free to share. Just going to pause for a moment, let the interpreters catch up. So what is our next dot? While the last few years have seen the FDA authorized treatments for some people living with very early stage Alzheimer's. These years have also seen a new focus on reducing the risk of developing dementia. So that's going to be our next dot. And we call these modifiable risk factors for dementia. The Lancet Commission 2024 update shows that up to 45% of cases of dementia are theoretically preventable by making progress on 14 modifiable risk factors. So in a few minutes, you're going to hear from two research experts who will focus on modifiable risk factors, or another way to think about that is brain health tips for individuals. So in other words, what we can change as individuals and the state of this research. So I'm going to put the Lancet report as a great resource if you want to dig into that in detail. And then we have another dot to connect today, because making progress on these modifiable risk factors is not easy to accomplish. And this is where we really see the impact of social determinants of brain health. These make it harder for people in some communities to put brain health tips into practice, and they contribute to those disparities in risk, access to diagnosis, treatment, and care that we see. So our second discussion today will focus on the social determinants of brain health that need to be addressed at a community level. And as a resource, I'm going to suggest the BOLD Center of Excellence for Risk Reduction, which is an Alzheimer's Association website. And Jessica will put the link in the chat. Thank you, Jessica. There's another important dot that we're going to connect today, which is living well with dementia. Life continues after diagnosis. And I know some of you here know this from personal experience, because you are living with dementia and you are continuing to focus on living well. The need to take care of one's brain health continues after diagnosis. Our last conversation today will be with two advocates who will share their experiences of how to live well and stay healthy. You are going to be really inspired, I know, to hear from Miriam Owens and Faye Bailey. But I just want to underscore why their discussion today is so important. It's not just that it's inspiring. It's that hearing from advocates who are living with dementia is necessary if we're able to have a balanced conversation about dementia. And why does this matter? Alzheimer's Disease International recently released its 2024 World Report, which shows that by many measures, there's actually been an increase in stigma about dementia since their last survey about this in 2019. That's really, I was quite shocked when I heard that. But what they attribute it to is that there is more conversation about dementia, but it's not balanced. It focuses on fear. For example, there are more movies where dementia is used as part of the plot, and more public conversation, more conversation on social media, but it tends to focus only on what is hard about dementia, not about what we can do. So we need to have voices like Miriam and Faye who share wisdom and resources about how people can continue to live lives of joy and purpose. So I'm very pleased that today's symposium is going to end on a special note, because Faye Bailey and her family created a very short, energizing video that captures really the most important messages of today's program. So you'll get to see that at the very end of the symposium. And Jessica just put some links in the chat, which are great resources on living well with dementia. I'm going to mention one last dot. There will not be a specific discussion about this dot today, but it's really going to be part of every conversation. And that is the need to think holistically about brain health and living well. People have many facets to them. The research on reducing dementia risk and the social determinants of health remind us that our health comes from how we live our lives every day, not just our medical care. So as providers of services or people who are using healthcare services, we need to bring medical care together with social care, including arts and cultural activity and broad-based age and dementia-friendly community movements. I just want to give a shout out to Art Pharmacy, a new model that is rolling out social prescribing across Massachusetts to enable providers to connect patients with arts and culture programs for their health. And so we know providers are very busy, and Art Pharmacy is a company that does the matchmaking and helps do that connecting to make it so much easier for us to include social care and arts and culture as part of our healthcare. Nationally, the GUIDE model is an exciting new approach from Medicare and Medicaid, which evaluates the health-related social needs of patients living with dementia and their care partners, and provides them with navigation, education, and support. I work with a national strategic planning initiative for memory cafes, and we just recently did a survey, and only 4% of the people running memory cafes around the country said that most medical professionals in their area even are aware memory cafes exist. These are great free programs that help to reduce social isolation for people living with dementia and their care partners. So even where resources exist, we need to collaborate better and really think of all of the people that we care about as full human beings with all these facets to them. So very excited to have you with us as we now launch into discussion one. So this research update on brain health and brain health communication will be a conversation with two speakers. First, you're going to hear from Susan Ankoviak, who is Vice President of Programs and Services at the Alzheimer's Association, Massachusetts, New Hampshire chapter. Susan oversees care consultation, evidence-based education programs, support groups, and early stage social engagement programs. And she is the intervention manager for the New England and Rhode Island site of the US Pointer study, which she will be telling us about. And after Susan, we will hear from Dr. Yakil Quiroz, who is associate professor in the departments of psychiatry and neurology at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School here in Boston. Dr. Quiroz serves as director of the Mass General Familial Dementia Neuroimaging Lab and the Multicultural Alzheimer's Prevention Program. So Susan, if you could unmute, I will go ahead and take you through your slides.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Beth, for a warm welcome, and what a lovely context for this inclusive and important conversation. I almost forgot that I was participating because I was so engaged in listening to all of the comments. But as you mentioned, you know, there has been so much progress in the areas of Alzheimer's and dementia science and research and treatment. And there is building hope around getting closer to effectively treating Alzheimer's disease and other dementia, and then, of course, eliminating the disease altogether. But we also are developing a better understanding of what may be putting our brain health at risk. And I think helping us to understand how we may be able to prevent Alzheimer's and dementia from happening in the first place. We don't have all of the answers. And as Beth mentioned, this is complex, but we're definitely seeing progress. So Beth, if you want to go to the first slide, I can talk about different kinds of risk factors. So with risk factors, you will see here on the right, and I'm sorry, do you see, I don't see the slide. Do you, is it up there, Beth?
Oh, you don't see the slide?
I don't, but that's okay, as long as everyone else can see it.
Let me double check.
No, we're getting head shakes.
Apologies, Beth. I had to take over host to handle some tech stuff. I did not realize you wouldn't share your screen. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So it looks like I can't share right now.
Okay, let me. make you, okay.
There we go. No problem.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
That's okay. I always say it's not the conference, the party doesn't start till there's some kind of technical issue. It's just
Checked it
always
off
part
early.
of my world. So, okay. Do you see it now, Susan?
Yes, yeah, thank
Okay,
you so much.
perfect.
So we
Go
got
right
that out
ahead.
of the way. That's fine. So yeah, when we talk about risk factors, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's sort of a smaller greenish blue oval, and that is indicating what we call non-modifiable risk factors. So these are things that by and large, we really can't control or influence or make changes with. First one being age. We can think about the quality of our aging, but, sort of biologically, to a large extent, you were born when you're born, and we really can't change that. Genetics are another thing that today, in 2024, we can't change, we can't affect. There are some genes that are associated with a greater risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And if you inherit one copy or two copies of these genes, then yes, indeed, you are at greater risk. But importantly, on the left-hand side of the screen, you will see a larger oval, that yellow kind of oval, and this speaks to what we call modifiable risk factors. So these are things that we can modify, we can make changes, we have some influence over, and we can control them. So some examples of those risk factors include your diet, they include your physical activity, your sleep in particular, your quality of sleep, heart health. Those are just a couple of examples, and you can see the rest listed there. Now, it's important to note that there is still a lot to learn, specifically about these risk factors, and we absolutely need to understand them in relation to all populations and across all angles. So, for example, when we think about diet, we, first of all, know a good amount of what could be considered a healthy diet, which I'll touch on in a second. But we need to know more. We need to better understand exactly what kind of diet can best promote brain health. But it's important to note that that there is not access to a variety of healthy food options that is equal in all communities. So this is complex, and it is something that requires certainly more study. Now, you'll see in the middle of this slide that there are a couple of factors, in particular race and ethnicity, sex and gender, and those very clearly sit in the middle. So we kind of think of those as non-modifiable and modifiable. So they illustrate that there are biological or genetic factors related to one's race and ethnicity, for example, but there are also, importantly, the conditions and the environment in which people live and work and experience their life. And those things together really contribute to the degree of risk that one's race and ethnicity can play in their overall brain health. Same for sex and gender. And our understanding of sex and gender is evolving over time. So all of this is to say that risk factors are complex. They relate in all different ways. And again, we really need to examine them from different angles. And absolutely, we need to ensure that we are studying these across all populations. Next slide, please, Beth. So now my statistic is outdated. Beth correctly shared that the Lancet Commission reported that potentially up to 45%, which is almost half of all dementia cases, could potentially be prevented or delayed by targeting those modifiable risk factors, those risk factors that we can influence. And adopting healthy habits can contribute to your brain health. So you'll see a few of them are on the left-hand side of the screen. So eating well, moving your body, challenging your brain, learning things that you haven't learned before are all a couple of examples of healthy habits that could contribute to your overall brain health. And the idea here is to start where you can. We don't, again, all have access to the same kinds of opportunities across all of our communities. And that's a critical part of our understanding. But also in terms of adopting a new lifestyle, it probably is not realistic to make drastic changes, even if we could. To make drastic changes across the board is likely not very sustainable, and research shows us that that is not sustainable. So starting where you can. A quick example for you is there are certain days in my job where I'm sitting in front of my screen all day. I have lots of meetings and things of that nature. So on those days, I try to think about getting up and moving in between meetings and being very intentional to take those breaks. So starting where you can is an important place to begin. And based on the research, we're also seeing that combining multiple healthy factors is most impactful. If we focus in on just one factor, we're limiting that opportunity to really affect our brain health in a positive way. So trying to think about a variety of different health factors is likely going to make the greatest impact. Next slide, please. So as Beth mentioned, I'm very honored to be a small part of US Pointer, and this is a 2-year clinical trial led by the Alzheimer's Association that is examining whether a combination of lifestyle interventions could protect the brain for people who are at risk for cognitive decline. And the lifestyle interventions include 4 basic areas for this particular study. One is diet. There is what is called the MIND diet, which is a combination of the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. And this means that it encourages things that won't surprise you. So green leafy vegetables, whole grains, limiting red meats and going for lean meats and poultry, incorporating fish into the diet, including beans, legumes, those kinds of things. So that's an example of the kind of diet that's being utilized in this study. Physical activity is the second area. And there are different kinds of physical activities. So aerobic exercise, so something that gets your heart rate up and your deep breathing going, strength training, stretching, balance, range of motion, all of those things. The third area is cognitive stimulation. So that includes intellectual stimulation. So again, learning things that might be new to you, but also social stimulation, ensuring that you're connecting with other people and socializing. And the last being health monitoring, in particular, your cardiovascular health. So paying attention to and being mindful of things like your blood pressure, glucose level, cholesterol levels, those kinds of things, managing your stress. And the combination of those things together are what are being examined. Now, Pointer, I'll just wrap up to say, intentionally sought out a more diversified population. Historically, clinical trials are heavily populated by a very homogeneous group. So it tend to be white, well-educated, well-resourced individuals, and largely women. So in this particular study, the intention was to do a better job at really representing our community. And we see in this particular study that there are approximately 30% people of color, 30% of men, which is high for a clinical trial. We see 27% of the people are individuals living alone. And we also see varying degrees of college education and a variety of other variables. And this study I will share is wrapping up this spring, and stay tuned. You will see a lot of information coming this summer that will report out our findings. So Beth, the last slide talks about US Pointer really rolls up to what is called the Fingers Network. So the important part about all of this effort is that it is happening globally. So across the globe, there are approximately 60 countries in various degrees of engaging in this study that, again, is taking a look at lifestyle interventions and how may that protect the brain. The more that we learn about a variety of populations and a variety of individuals in terms of their biology, their social contexts, the life that they're living, the more it will deepen our understanding of brain health, and then ultimately, again, how we may prevent or delay things such as Alzheimer's disease and other dementia. So Beth, I'll send that back to you. That's my introduction.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was very helpful and interesting and exciting to think about the research findings that we will be hearing more of this summer. I would like to invite Dr. Quiroz to share your screen. Dr. Quiroz is going to take us through some slides as well. And then the three of us will talk a little bit more about what you've just heard. And we also will take some questions from the audience. So please feel free to put your questions in. I saw it. It looks like the Q&A is not functioning, so please put them in the chat. Go ahead, Dr. Quiroz.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation, and also thank you for organizing this wonderful symposium. So I'm going to follow to what Susan was presenting, and the sense of, and based on the hospital, the Massachusetts General Hospital, there I direct a program that is a multicultural Alzheimer's prevention program. I'm originally from Colombia, so I'm very interested in understanding multicultural issues, and that's one of the reasons why I started this program at the hospital. So, and the research that we do, and I'm going to be briefly discussing some of that, is very focused on understanding cognitive vulnerability or risk, and also resilience and protective factors in older individuals, particularly those from different cultures. So this is related to what was presented before by Beth and also mentioned by Susan, that is the Lancet report, when we had 14 different factors that are shown here. Factors that can protect against a cognitive decline. There is like education, that is an early life factor. 9 factors that are linked to midlife risk, and then we have 3 that are late in life. So as mentioned before, they account for about 45% of this risk to Alzheimer's disease, explaining 45% of cases. And another—
Dr. Quiroz, yep. I'm sorry, I apologize to interrupt. I just got a message from the interpreter that if you could speak a little slower. I think all of us have been speaking quickly. I realize it's very hard to slow down. I think I wasn't going slowly,
okay.
But if you could a bit, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm gonna try. I always get the message that I speak very fast, so I'm gonna try my best.
Thank you.
There are 14 risk factors, including in the early life with education, 9 factors that explain the risk associated with midlife, and 3 factors that were identified as risk factors for late life. So all of these together explain about 45% of cases at the worldwide level. And a different study just most recently showed that about 56% of cases, when we actually look in Latin America, and the same in other regions as well, it seems like the modifiable risk factors can actually play an even more important role in preventing dementia. So as I mentioned before, so I'm the director of the Multicultural Alzheimer's Prevention Program, and we try to do our best to characterize dementia and cognitive decline using a cultural approach. For that, as mentioned before, I think that it's very important to use the language that our patients feel more comfortable with. I appreciate what was Nora mentioned at the beginning. That makes a huge difference if patients are actually evaluated and follow up in their own language. So we try to give priority to that. We're also trying to, in the research, consult with patients and families, so we know what is more important for them. And we do some biomarker and genetic characterization as well. I'm not going to be talking today. So in 2022, and this is part of the research, and if you want to read more, I invite you to review this. So we propose a cultural approach to dementia, and we provided some insights from our experience working with Latino individuals living in the US. And as part of this, and also was mentioned before, one of the motivations is that Latinos and also like African Americans are at increased risk to develop dementia compared to other groups. And unfortunately, they continue to be underserved and underrepresented in clinical research and other studies. So one of the recommendations that we proposed at the end of this review was actually to characterize not just the risk factors, but also trying to understand better what are the protective factors that can make us resilient against cognitive decline in different communities. So we started one study that is called the Boston Latino Aging Study. Now it's in its 4th year. And as part of the BLAST, or the Boston Latino Aging Study, we are trying just to characterize that, characterize the risk and characterize the protection in Latinos and see how that can be similar or different from other groups. So we have now everything for testing Spanish-speaking individuals and also Portuguese-speaking, Portuguese-Brazilian speaking as well. And we are working in adding Haitian Creole as another language as well. So individuals that are older than 55 are the ones that are being included in this study. And as I mentioned before, the main goal is to characterize pretty much the risk, but understanding how that can be impacted by psychosocial factors, like personal experiences, and also for social determinants of health. So as I was mentioned before, and I think that you're going to hear this several times, these risk factors that we know that we can modify are risk factors that are always there for us to start changing. I agree to what Susan was saying before. The most important thing is to start somewhere. You don't have to start and changing everything, but like anything that you do that can improve your risk, improve your protection and reduce your risk for dementia is something good. So cardiovascular health is something that I put first, because cardiovascular health includes, for instance, hypertension, diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, that are conditions that can be treated. So like sometimes we don't pay attention to those, but if we actually receive the treatment, we can reduce the risk. So monitoring that cardiovascular health is very critical. Physical activity, as I was mentioned before, we know now that about like 150 minutes per week is the idea, but like you don't need to do that to get some benefit. Like, you know, anything that you do to keep your body moving, as I was saying before, it could be just standing in front of your desk, as I discuss sometimes with my patients, if they live in a 2-floor house, just going upstairs and downstairs, it could be also a way of getting activity. So pretty much trying to move your body. As it was mentioned before, the diet, especially healthy diet and balanced diet, cognitive engagement, and this is something that I'm particularly interested in further understanding, because sometimes we think that it's just doing puzzles or crosswords. And the key part here is to actually have something that is cognitively engaging. So for instance, if you are doing those, but you are not like fully engaged in the activity, it may be not as beneficial as learning a new skill or learning another language. So it's how much your brain is actually put into place and engage in an activity. So social interaction was something was mentioned. You may have seen in the news that loneliness is actually considered right now like as one of the public health problems that we have, especially as population gets older. So getting strong relationships is key to feel that protection as well. Reducing or stopping smoking and also alcohol use is another factor. And as I was mentioned before, sleep is key. But the same, like, it's not like, I'm gonna sleep 2 more hours today just to compensate. Unfortunately, we don't compensate for the sleep that we lose, but the important thing is trying to be consistent and take your time to actually sleep. And if you need help, talk to your PCP to see how you can improve your sleep. And if you need a sleep examination or something like that, also is something that has a treatment. For mental health, and also going to the treatment, mental health refers to like depression and anxiety and stress. We know that those factors play an important role, increasing the risk. In our own work, we have seen that Unfortunately, for instance, the older Latino that was part of the study, they actually reported a greater depression compared to the non-Latino whites, for instance. So, and we know that that's a like direct risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. But depression has treatment. So getting the help that you need to reduce that risk factor can be critical as well. So the other study that I wanted to briefly mention is the other study that we have that is called Multicultural Resilient Brain. And this one refers to trying to understand that resilience in different cultures, but trying to understand it in individuals that don't decline. So we assume that everybody's gonna lose their memory as they get older, but that's not true. There are several people that they can get even 80 or 90 and they don't have memory problems. So we are actually in this study characterizing those individuals that are pretty much the ones that get until very older, the oldest ages, as we call them, and they don't have cognitive decline, to see if there is anything in their genetics or the life factors that can explain some of that resilience. So this is exactly what I was saying. It's also when we understand resilience, as we understand resilience, for instance, in research, sometimes they can be protected, they can have intact cognitive function, even if they have a pathology in their blood, pathology in their brain, for instance. So it's like what exactly is making them resilient to develop dementia. And as the same with other research, unfortunately, we don't know much about protection in the oldest old ages and also in diverse samples. So that's one of the goals of this project. And the way that we are doing it is also very interesting because we are trying to understand it, not just in the Latinos that live in the US, but also in the Latinos that live in Latin America. So we have an international collaboration. We now, for different countries, including like Colombia, Chile, Peru, Costa Rica, that we are trying to see what are the commonalities or the difference between the Latinos that actually live there and those that immigrate to the US. Some of the factors that we are trying to better characterize in this study is like the same type of diet, but also like what kind of ingredients or even the fruits or the vegetables that we have access to, the access to education, the quality of education. Like as we live in different contexts, like the viruses that we are exposed to, like the environmental conditions and that can also play a role, the access to healthcare system and how that can have an impact, as I was saying, even the controlling the cardiovascular health, access to gyms. That's something that is very easy to say, do physical activity, but there are some communities that they don't have a gym or they don't have any kind of access to this. Also, the cultural value, like for instance, in Latinos is very important, the family, and we rely a lot on family members and close friends to do activities. It's kind of like how you actually get engaged in a family. How do you get engaged as a family versus engaged as an individual? The same, like having friends is key. So part of the work that we're doing, and this is ongoing, is trying to see if those factors that can explain not just risk, but more focus on the protective factors are culturally specific. And if we can actually use that information to prevent in the future a cognitive decline. So these are the specific implications that, for instance, and it was briefly mentioned before as well, that we can see in Latinos and other groups that are different from the non-Latinos. And they include like a cultural, socioeconomic, and health-related context. It was mentioned before the stigma. For instance, it's not just a stigma around dementia, but also a stigma around mental health. What it means to say that you are depressed or you are anxious and stressed, for instance, in a Latino community versus in other communities. As I mentioned, the physical activity opportunities, not everybody gets access to the same. And also, as we mentioned before, how the language that you use to communicate and get access to healthcare is key to also be closer to even share with your PCP or your doctor what you're going through. So I'm gonna just briefly mention one study that we recently published, that it was kind of like coming back and trying to understand these protective factors. And we actually conducted an online survey. So this is kind of like just was completed online when we ask individuals, and for this paper in particular, we're only including individuals from the US. We completed the same survey in Latin America. And the ones from the US, the same, like the majority were, of course, non-Latino whites, but we have 126 that self-identify as Latino, 74 that self-identify as Black, and 33 that self-identify as an Asian. For these individuals, we asked them to complete several questionnaires, but the main questions that we're interested in here are the two questions. It was kind of like how purpose in life, that is measured here with the life questionnaire, was impacting their protection, in this case, as mentioned, as subjective cognitive decline, and loneliness, if that was playing a role or not. But the same, we were interested, and we are still interested to better understand how these risk factors or protective factors can present differently in different cultures or communities. So the same, it was super interesting, and I'm gonna just mention some of the findings. But the first thing that we found is, like, for the Latinos, for instance, being female and having this higher purpose in life predicted lower subjective cognitive decline. In other words, those that were women identified as a female in this case and reported more purpose in life, they have less cognitive concerns or less cognitive decline in this case. When we see it here, and this is like the same, I think that was very interesting, like just the predictors, pretty much what were the factors that lead to lower score, lower ratings, and subjective cognitive decline. And you can see that they were not the same by the groups. For instance, in the non-Latino whites, greater purpose in life and lower loneliness were the better predictors. For the Latinos, as I mentioned, like greater purpose in life and the sex, in this case, female sex. For the Asian group, just greater purpose in life was alone to predict lower cognitive decline. And in the Black group, purpose in life didn't predict it, but it was more important, the lower loneliness, that it was linking to the subjective cognitive decline. The other question that we answered with this data was to see what were the best predictors or the best predictors of purpose in life. And the same, you can see that they are different for all the groups. Interestingly, for instance, for the Latinos, having an employment, this is Latinos living in the US, having an employment was the best predictor of purpose in life. The Asian group, they have three, the education, income, and also lower loneliness. For the Black group, higher income and lower loneliness. And for the non-Latino groups, having a higher level of education and higher income were the best predictors of purpose in life. So you can see how these predictors are different depending on the culture and the community that you are part of. So just to conclude, and just to kind of like bring you back to what we have discussed, so these are kind of like the summary of the tips to improve your brain health. Like the saying, it's important to monitor your physical health, as I mentioned, especially everything that is related with cardiovascular health. Try to control your blood pressure, your levels of glucose and cholesterol, and trying to maintain a BMI. This is the height and weight calculation in a healthy range. So don't go in over obesity, for instance. Try your best to adopt healthy lifestyle, including the balanced diet, stop smoking, limiting alcohol use, stay physically active, as I was saying, like 150 minutes a week, for instance, is kind of like what is the recommended number of minutes. And try to prioritize having a better sleep, not just one night, but as a continuum. And the last thing is enhance social and emotional well-being. The same, I didn't include it here, but manage your stress, the depression, the anxiety, everything that you can control with your mood. It will help to have a better brain health. Building strong relationships, as I mentioned, the lower loneliness that you have is a protective factor. And finally, as something that our research is showing, find the sense of purpose in life, because it's definitely a good predictor against cognitive decline. And others have shown that also against dementia. And with that, so I want to thank again for the invitation. Hopefully I didn't speak too fast, and I'm happy to go now in the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Quiroz. And so now we have a few minutes to discuss some questions that came in through the chat. And Anne, maybe you can spotlight Susan as well. And I just want to comment on how interesting it is that we're talking about health and we're talking about concepts like having a purpose, sense of purpose in life, and loneliness. And we're learning more and more about the health impacts of these aspects of who we are as people, and also how different cultural communities have different kinds of challenges and different resources for resilience. So thank you both for giving us a framework. There were a couple of questions in the chat about how to encourage people from under-resourced communities to participate in research. And I would love to ask you both about that. Dr. Quiroz, that's such an important part of what you do, is providing a pathway for Latinos and people of other backgrounds who might not always be represented. And then Susan, you mentioned with the Pointer study, that's been a big area of emphasis. So Dr. Quiroz, could I ask you first, and then we'll go to Susan? What is it that researchers can do to make sure that they're representing a wide range of linguistic and cultural communities?
Thank you. That's a really good question. So I will start by saying that it really takes intention. So like, if you actually want to increase diversity in the research that you're doing, you have to actually want to do it. Like it takes a lot of effort to actually get to that point. So which the same, like with other communities, you can just have a flyer and they get the flyer and they respond. As I was showing with the online survey, for instance, for the online survey was, we just shared the flyer, and out of all these individuals that we got a minority or Latinos, a minority of Black Americans, a minority of Asian. And I didn't go through the levels of education, but the level of education of the online survey was highly educated individuals. So I mean, like, it's great because it's a first approach, so at least we get some data, but like it's not representative or what we actually have in our communities. Like, so what we actually do, we go to the community a lot. So every week, like every Thursday, we are somewhere in the community, talking to the community, educating the community. And now we have some established partnerships with senior centers around Boston. And the consulates, for instance, especially the consulate from Colombia, Mexico, have been very supportive of our work. So we go to where they are, and we talk to them. And like they say, like, it's not required to participate in any research, but we explain to them every week why it's important to have their participation in our studies. And this is like some people may decide right away that they want to do it. Some others may take longer to actually decide. And some others say no. But at least it's kind of like being consistent in the community and having a consistent presence. I think it has been key for us. We also have a partnership with the radio. Don William Lopera is the one that invites us. We go once a month at least to talk to the community about the research that we are doing and how they can get involved.
Thank you very much. So go to where people are and figure out what is a comfortable place and a meaningful way to connect with them over time. It's not just a flyer, as you said, it's a real commitment, a real intention. How about you, Susan? Do you have any comments to add to that?
I would just wholeheartedly agree with what Dr. Quiroz said, which is intention. To go about engaging all of our community in sort of a casual way, it's just not going to be successful. And I can share that for US Pointer, a couple of examples of how we engage folks. Again, as Dr. Quiroz said, we were in the community and just, understanding the community, being a part of the community, listening. The way you started this symposium, Beth, was first asking, what do people want to know? So I think asking questions, learning, listening is the way to begin to build those relationships. And then ultimately what we found was that in Rhode Island, for example, there was a faith-based community that was really interested in helping to promote general health in their congregation. So as we started to develop more understanding of what that meant, it became a natural opportunity for us to talk about recruitment for this brain health study, which resonated with the community. And we had, for US Pointer, there are 5 sites across the country. So this was the New England site. Each site had its own opportunity to engage. In Texas, for example, it was a little bit different. So it depends on the community and what people are interested in and what they learn and what they value, I very much believe. The last thing I'll add is one thing that's helpful is to draw researchers to the field who also represent our population. And Dr. Quiros is a clinician. I am not, but still that population is predominantly a homogeneous group as well. So bringing researchers who look and live as our full population does is certainly going to help contribute as well.
Thank you, Susan.
May
So
we just add something there? I think that is a super important point that Susan, and also takes intention, because the same, my group, for instance, is a very multicultural and diverse group, and that doesn't happen by accident. Pretty much like you're actually trying to hire people that that is going to help you to move and advance the mission or your research program. And also the language, it's kind of like, as I mentioned at the beginning, as it was mentioned also at the beginning of the symposium, that makes a huge difference. Like, is you have people that can actually speak Spanish, in our case, Spanish, Portuguese, as I mentioned, like we have those languages there. So I think that it opens a door that is not the same if you don't speak the same language.
Thank you very much. And we have reached technically the time where this first conversation needs to close and we shift to the other one. But since we're talking about research and the important issue of making sure that research is representative, there are 2 speakers from the second discussion that have important pieces to share here. And I wonder, maybe I can quickly pull them in for a minute. Lisa Krinsky from the LGBTQIA+ Aging Project has been working with a research initiative. And Lisa, I wonder if you can quickly come on screen and share that research. And then I'm going to ask if Judith Thermidor is with us and maybe can share a little bit about how she has made that bridge to research for community members. Go ahead, Lisa.
Right. I'd be happy to, and thank you to the previous speakers for all that you're saying. So I think it's so important what you were saying about having representation, both in the people who are conducting research and the people who are representing it. And so just to lift up the fact that there is something called the RISE registry, and I'll put it in the chat so people can get access to it. And it's the Research Inclusion Supports Equity project that is looking at a national effort designed to connect LGBTQI+ friendly resources and opportunities in research for folks, so that we're seeing increased levels of dementia in LGBTQI+ folks, and wanting to make sure that we are getting into the population of folks who are part of those research studies. So Emory University, University of Nevada, and University of Tennessee are all working together on that, and I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Just a reminder to all of us who are speaking to try to speak slowly for the interpreters who are working so hard. Judith, if you would, you have done so much to help community members understand how to participate in research and to feel comfortable with that. Would you say a little bit about how you have done that?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Beth. Yes, as you have mentioned, it's all about the intention. I always invite all academic institutions that we have a great privilege in Boston to have some good academic institutions to come to the community for educational program, but not only for educational program, as well to invite the community in research. And we always say that probably they have never been asked, but they have a lot of willingness to participate in research. So far with Mass General Hospital, McLean, Brigham and Women's Hospital, Tufts University, and other health centers that they are doing research. And sometimes they don't meet the criteria to participate, but the intention, they are willing to participate. So I think we are moving forward, all of us, for medical advancements as part of Aging Solutions.
Thank you so much, Judith. And Judith Thermidor is the director of the East Boston Council on Aging. And that's only one of so many hats that she wears. And Judith, one thing that has struck me in the past when you've talked about this is that participating in research can give people a feeling of hope. It's a way they can do something to take some action. And I think that has been part of your message, which has made a difference to people. So thank you, Judith and Lisa, for being willing to pop in to this first discussion. Thank you so much, Yakil and Susan, for all the information that you've shared. And we will now transition over to our second part of the program today.